The morning sun painted golden streaks across the frost-covered fields of Norfolk as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at her bedroom window, watching the countryside wake up. Snow had fallen gently during the night, creating a perfect winter wonderland that stretched as far as the eye could see. Today was special. It was the day of the annual Norfolk Holiday Show, and she had promised Charlotte and Louis they would attend together. Catherine smiled as she heard the excited chatter of her children echoing through the halls of their Norfolk residence. This was their favorite time of year, when the family could escape the formal duties of royal life and simply be together. The Norfolk Holiday Show was a beloved local tradition, one that brought the entire community together to celebrate the season with crafts, performances, and the kind of warm fellowship that made Catherine's heart feel full. She had been looking forward to this day for weeks. After months of official engagements, charity events, and public appearances, the prospect of spending an afternoon as simply Mum rather than Your Royal Highness filled her with quiet joy. Charlotte, now 11, had been talking non-stop about the holiday crafts she wanted to see, while 9-year-old Louis was most excited about the traditional puppet show that would be performed on the main stage. As Catherine made her way downstairs, she found Charlotte already dressed in her favorite winter coat, a deep blue wool piece that brought out her eyes. The young princess was carefully adjusting a handmade scarf that she had knitted herself during her crafts lessons. Catherine's heart swelled with pride as she watched her daughter's careful attention to detail, a trait that seemed to grow stronger each day. "Mummy, do you think they'll have the same gingerbread booth as last year?" Charlotte asked, her voice filled with hopeful excitement. "I've been practicing my decorating skills, and I really want to try making those little houses again." "I'm sure they will, darling," Catherine replied, reaching out to smooth Charlotte's hair. "Mrs. Henderson from the village has been running that booth for 15 years. She told me just last week that she's prepared extra supplies this year because so many children want to participate." Louis bounded into the room at that moment, his energy infectious as always. He wore his warmest jumper, the red one with reindeers that his grandmother had knitted for him, and his face was flushed with excitement. "Can we see the magic show first?" he asked, bouncing slightly on his toes. "Tommy from school said his older brother saw it last year and there was a real rabbit that appeared from nowhere." Catherine laughed, the sound light and musical in the quiet morning air. "We'll see everything, my love. That's the wonderful thing about the holiday show, we have the whole afternoon to explore every single booth and performance." The family's protection officer, James, appeared at the kitchen doorway with a gentle smile. He had been with them long enough to understand the importance of these family moments, and he always did his best to remain unobtrusive during their private time. "The car is ready whenever you are, ma'am," he said quietly. "The roads are clear, though we might encounter some traffic as we get closer to the village green." Catherine nodded gratefully. James had a wonderful way of anticipating their needs without making the children feel overwhelmed by security protocols. She appreciated how he balanced his professional duties with genuine care for their family's well-being. As they prepared to leave, Catherine found herself reflecting on how much these simple moments meant to her. Royal life, while filled with incredible opportunities to serve and make a difference, could sometimes feel overwhelming in its constant demands. Days like today reminded her why she and William had chosen to make Norfolk their primary family home. Here, away from the intense scrutiny of London, their children could experience something closer to a normal childhood. The drive to the village took them through some of the most beautiful countryside in England. Snow-laden trees created a natural cathedral along the winding roads, and Catherine pointed out various landmarks to the children as they passed. There was the old mill where they had gone on nature walks last summer, the meadow where they had picked wildflowers for Charlotte's pressed flower collection, and the small bridge where Louis had caught his first fish under William's patient guidance. "Look, Mummy!" Charlotte exclaimed, pressing her face to the window. "I can see the smoke from the village chimneys already. That means everyone is getting ready for the show." Sure enough, as they crested the small hill that overlooked the village, they could see the bustling activity on the green. Colorful tents and booths were arranged in neat rows, their bright awnings standing out against the white snow like flowers in a winter garden. People were already arriving, families bundled in warm coats and scarves, children skipping alongside their parents with the same excitement that radiated from Charlotte and Louis. The village green had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Strings of warm white lights connected the various booths, creating a magical canopy that would look even more beautiful as the afternoon progressed into evening. A large Christmas tree stood in the center of it all, decorated with handmade ornaments created by local children over the past weeks. Catherine could already spot several crafts that looked like they might have come from Charlotte's art classes. As their car pulled up to the designated parking area, Catherine noticed how the organizers had thoughtfully managed the event. There was plenty of space for families to move around comfortably, clear pathways between booths, and several warming stations where people could stop for hot chocolate or tea. It was exactly the kind of community event that made her proud to call Norfolk home. Mrs. Williams, the event coordinator and a longtime resident of the village, approached their car with a warm smile. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of practical wisdom that came from years of organizing community events. Catherine had worked with her on several occasions and had developed genuine respect for her organizational skills and deep commitment to bringing people together. "Your Royal Highness, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis," Mrs. Williams said with a respectful but warm greeting. "We're so delighted you could join us today. The children have been asking all morning if you would really be coming." "We wouldn't miss it for the world," Catherine replied sincerely. "This is one of our favorite traditions. Charlotte and Louis have been looking forward to it for weeks." As they walked onto the green, Catherine was struck by the immediate sense of welcome and belonging that enveloped them. Yes, people noticed their arrival and there were respectful nods and smiles, but there was none of the overwhelming attention that often accompanied their public appearances. Here, they were simply neighbors joining in a community celebration. The first booth they encountered was run by the local primary school, where children had created an array of winter crafts. Paper snowflakes of incredible intricacy hung from the booth's ceiling, each one unique and beautiful. Catherine admired the creativity and effort that had gone into each piece, remembering her own school days when such projects had filled her with similar pride. Charlotte was immediately drawn to a display of handmade dolls dressed in traditional winter costumes. Each doll had been carefully crafted by students in different grades, and the attention to detail was remarkable. "Mummy, look at this one," Charlotte said, pointing to a doll wearing a miniature version of a Norfolk fisherman's coat. "The buttons are made from real shells." A young girl, probably about 8 years old, stepped forward shyly. "I made that one," she said quietly. "My granddad helped me find the shells when we went to the beach last month." Catherine knelt down to the child's level, her smile genuine and encouraging. "It's absolutely beautiful. You should be very proud of your work. The detail in the stitching is remarkable. Did you learn to sew from your grandmother?" The little girl's face lit up with pride and she nodded enthusiastically. "Nan taught me last summer. She said I have good fingers for small work." These were the moments Catherine treasured most, the simple human connections that reminded her why community events like this were so important. In an age of digital entertainment and virtual connections, there was something irreplaceably valuable about neighbors gathering to share their talents and celebrate together. Louis, meanwhile, had been captivated by a nearby booth where local woodcarvers were demonstrating their craft. An elderly man with weathered hands was carefully shaping a piece of oak into what would eventually become a toy horse. The rhythmic sound of his carving tools and the sweet scent of wood shavings created an almost meditative atmosphere. "Would you like to try?" the craftsman asked Louis with a grandfather's smile. "I have some softwood and safe tools that young ones can use." Catherine watched with careful attention as the man showed Louis how to hold the carving tool properly and guide it along the wood grain. Louis's face was a study in concentration, his tongue poking out slightly as he focused on following the craftsman's instructions. It reminded Catherine of William at that age, equally focused when learning new skills, whether it was writing or sailing or any of the countless activities that filled a young prince's education. "This is harder than it looks," Louis said with typical honesty, but his determination was clear as he continued working on his small project. "All good things are hard at first," the craftsman replied wisely. "But, with practice, your hands learn to work with the wood instead of against it. That's the secret to any craft worth doing." Catherine found profound wisdom in those simple words. They applied not just to woodcarving but to so many aspects of life, including the delicate art of raising children in the public eye while trying to give them as normal a childhood as possible. As the afternoon progressed, they moved from booth to booth, each one offering its own unique charm and learning opportunity. At the pottery station, Charlotte tried her hand at shaping clay on a wheel, her initial frustration at the uncooperative medium gradually giving way to delight as she began to understand its properties. Louis was fascinated by the traditional blacksmith demonstration, watching with wide eyes as the smith shaped red-hot metal into useful tools. The sense of community was palpable everywhere they went. Families helped each other navigate the crowded pathways, strangers shared tables at the food stations, and children from different schools played together as if they had known each other forever. Catherine observed how naturally Charlotte and Louis fit into this environment, their royal status seeming to matter far less than their genuine enthusiasm for participation. At the face painting booth, both children chose designs that reflected their personalities perfectly. Charlotte opted for delicate snowflakes painted in silver and blue around her eyes, while Louis chose to have his cheek transformed into a winter landscape complete with a tiny painted sledge. The artist, a teenager from the local secondary school, worked with the focused precision of someone who took great pride in her craft. "I want to be an artist someday," the girl confided to Charlotte as she added the finishing touches to her snowflake design. "I'm studying art at college next year, and I hope to specialize in portrait work." "That's wonderful," Charlotte replied with genuine interest. "Do you paint portraits of people from the village?" "Sometimes," the girl said. "My art teacher says I have a good eye for capturing personality in faces. Maybe someday I'll be good enough to paint really important people." Catherine smiled at the earnest ambition in the young artist's voice, remembering her own teenage dreams and aspirations. It was remarkable how art could serve as a bridge between people of all backgrounds and ages, creating connections that transcended social boundaries. As they made their way toward the center of the green where the afternoon's main performances would take place, Catherine reflected on how perfect this day was becoming. The weather had remained crisp but pleasant, the snow adding beauty without creating difficulties, and the atmosphere was everything she had hoped for. Most importantly, Charlotte and Louis were having the kind of day she wanted them to remember forever, filled with discovery, creativity, and the warm fellowship of their community. The village green was now bustling with activity as more families arrived for the afternoon performances. Catherine could see the puppet show stage being prepared in the distance, and she knew that would be their next stop. But, for now, she was content to simply be present in this moment, watching her children explore and learn, surrounded by the kind of authentic community spirit that made Norfolk feel like home. The puppet show stage had been set up on a small rise at the far end of the village green, giving it the perfect vantage point for all the assembled families. Catherine could see that considerable effort had gone into creating something truly special for the children. The stage itself was decorated with hand-painted backdrops depicting a magical winter forest, complete with snow-laden pine trees and a cozy cottage with smoke curling from its chimney. Louis practically vibrated with excitement as they made their way through the gathering crowd. "Mummy, can we sit in the front?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the colorful stage. "I want to see everything up close." "Of course, darling," Catherine replied, though she was mindful of not taking seats that other children might want. She was relieved to see that the organizers had thoughtfully arranged hay bales covered with warm blankets in rows, creating a natural amphitheater where everyone would have a good view. Charlotte, ever the considerate older sister, helped guide Louis to a spot where he could see clearly while making sure they weren't blocking anyone behind them. Catherine noticed how naturally Charlotte had begun taking on this protective role, always thinking of others' needs alongside her own excitement. It was a trait that would serve her well throughout her life. As they settled onto their blanket-covered hay bale, Mrs. Henderson from the gingerbread booth appeared beside them with a tray of warm treats. "I thought the children might like something special for the show," she said with a grandmother's smile, offering beautifully decorated gingerbread figures shaped like the characters they were about to see performed. "Mrs. Henderson, you're too kind," Catherine said warmly. "You really didn't need to go to such trouble." "Nonsense," the elderly woman replied. "It's my pleasure. Besides, these little ones have brought such joy to our community events. It's the least I can do." Catherine accepted the treats gratefully, touched once again by the genuine warmth of the Norfolk community. These spontaneous gestures of kindness were what made their life here so special. It wasn't about grand formal exchanges but rather the simple human connections that made everyone feel valued and welcomed. The puppet show began with a musical flourish as Mr. Davies, the village's longtime puppeteer, emerged from behind the stage to introduce the afternoon's entertainment. He was a man in his 70s, with wild white hair and the kind of theatrical presence that immediately captured every child's attention. Catherine had learned that he had been performing for the village children for over 3 decades, creating new stories each year while maintaining the magical quality that made his shows legendary among local families. "Welcome, welcome, young friends and families," Mr. Davies called out in his rich, theatrical voice. "Today we have a very special tale to share with you, the story of the Winter Star and the kindness that lives in every heart, no matter how small." As the curtains parted to reveal the puppet stage, a collective gasp of wonder rose from the assembled children. The scene was breathtakingly beautiful, with handcrafted puppets that moved with surprising grace and realism. The attention to detail was extraordinary, from the intricate costumes to the expressive faces that somehow managed to convey deep emotion despite being made of cloth and wood. The story unfolded with a young rabbit who had become separated from his family during the first snowfall of winter. Lost and frightened in the magical forest, the little rabbit encountered various woodland creatures who each offered their own form of help and kindness. There was the wise old owl who shared the warmth of his tree hollow, the industrious squirrel who provided nuts for sustenance, and the gentle deer who offered guidance through the confusing paths of the snow-covered woods. Louis was completely absorbed in the performance, his gingerbread figure forgotten in his lap as he leaned forward to catch every word and gesture. Catherine could see him mentally placing himself in the story, his expressions mirroring those of the puppet characters as they faced challenges and discoveries. Charlotte, while equally engaged, watched with the more analytical eye of someone beginning to appreciate the artistry behind the magic. Catherine noticed her studying how the puppets were manipulated, how the voices were created, and how the lighting effects enhanced the storytelling. It was fascinating to see her daughter's mind working, beginning to understand the craftsmanship and creativity that brought such performances to life. The climax of the story came when all the woodland creatures worked together to create a brilliant winter star that would guide the lost rabbit home to his family. As the star appeared above the puppet stage, created through an ingenious combination of lighting and a beautifully crafted silver ornament, spontaneous applause erupted from the audience. But Mr. Davies wasn't finished. In a masterful storytelling move, he turned to address the audience directly through his rabbit puppet. "You know," the puppet said in its sweet, childlike voice, "I learned something very important on my journey. Home isn't just a place, it's wherever you find kindness and love from others." Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion at these simple but profound words. They captured exactly what she had been feeling all afternoon about their Norfolk community. This was home not because of the beautiful countryside or the comfortable residence, but because of the genuine warmth and acceptance they had found among their neighbors. As the performance concluded with the rabbit joyfully reuniting with his family, the entire audience erupted in enthusiastic applause. Children jumped to their feet, some calling out praise for their favorite characters, others asking questions about how the magic had been created. Mr. Davies emerged from behind the puppet stage, his face glowing with the satisfaction of a successful performance. He was immediately surrounded by excited children, each wanting to know more about the puppets, the story, and how he had created such magical effects. Louis, typically bold in his enthusiasm, was among the first to approach the puppeteer. "Mr. Davies, how did you make the star appear like that? It was like real magic." The elderly man's eyes twinkled with delight as he knelt to Louis's level. "Ah, young prince, that's the wonderful thing about theater, it's all about making people believe in magic, even when they know it's created by human hands and imagination." Catherine was struck by how naturally Mr. Davies engaged with Louis, treating him as he would any curious child while maintaining appropriate respect for his position. It was exactly the kind of interaction she hoped her children would experience, being valued for their genuine interest and enthusiasm rather than their titles. Charlotte, ever thoughtful, had a different question. "Mr. Davies, how long does it take you to create a new story like this one? Do you make all the puppets yourself?" "What an excellent question, Princess Charlotte," he replied, his tone indicating genuine pleasure at her interest in the creative process. "This particular story took me about 6 months to develop. I start with the message I want to share, in this case, the importance of kindness and community, and then I build the characters and plot around that theme. He gestured toward the puppet stage where several of the characters were still visible. As for the puppets, yes, I create them all in my workshop. Each one is hand-carved and painted, with costumes sewn by my dear wife, Margaret. She's particularly gifted with the intricate details that bring the characters to life. Catherine found herself genuinely fascinated by this glimpse into the creative process. It reminded her of the countless hours of preparation that went into her own public engagements, the research, planning, and attention to detail that the public rarely saw but which made all the difference in the final result. As they chatted with Mr. Davies, other families began gathering around, creating an impromptu community discussion about storytelling, creativity, and the importance of preserving traditional arts. Catherine listened as parents shared memories of puppet shows from their own childhoods, and children excitedly described their favorite parts of the performance. Mrs. Williams, the event coordinator, appeared at Catherine's elbow with a gentle reminder. Your Royal Highness, if you'd like to visit the carol singers before they begin their performance, now would be a perfect time. They're doing a final rehearsal behind the refreshment tent. Catherine thanked her and turned to Charlotte and Louis. Would you like to meet the carol singers before their show begins? I understand there are children from several local schools participating. Both children nodded eagerly, still energized by the magic of the puppet show and ready for the next adventure. As they made their way across the green toward the refreshment area, Catherine noticed how the afternoon light was beginning to change, creating longer shadows and a softer, more golden quality that made the entire scene look like something from a storybook. The carol singers were indeed an impressive sight. About 30 children and teenagers from various local schools had come together to create a unified choir, ranging in age from about 6 to 16. They wore simple white scarves over their winter coats, creating a visual harmony that matched their musical preparation. The choir director, Miss Patricia Holbrook, was a woman in her 40s with the kind of patient but energetic demeanor that marked excellent music teachers everywhere. Catherine had met her briefly at a school visit earlier in the year and remembered being impressed by her dedication to making music accessible to all children, regardless of their family's financial circumstances. Children, Ms. Holbrook called gently, we have some special guests who'd like to meet you before your performance. The young singers arranged themselves into neat rows with the kind of practiced ease that spoke to good preparation and mutual respect. Catherine was struck by how they ranged from tiny 6-year-olds who could barely be seen behind their taller classmates to confident teenagers who clearly took their responsibility as older chorus members seriously. We're so excited to hear your performance, Catherine said warmly to the assembled group. Ms. Holbrook tells me you've been practicing together for weeks. What songs will you be sharing with us today? A brave 10-year-old near the front raised her hand. We're singing traditional English carols, Your Royal Highness, but we've also learned some international holiday songs. My favorite is the one from Germany about the Christmas market. Charlotte stepped forward with interest. I've been learning German in school. Could you teach me a few words from that song? What followed was a delightfully spontaneous language exchange as several of the children gathered around Charlotte, excitedly sharing German phrases and comparing their pronunciation. Catherine watched with pleasure as her daughter engaged naturally with children her own age, the formal aspects of her position temporarily forgotten in the joy of shared learning. Louis, meanwhile, had been drawn to the youngest members of the choir. He knelt down to chat with a little boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old and looked somewhat overwhelmed by the crowd of older children around him. Are you nervous? Louis asked kindly. I get nervous sometimes when lots of people are watching. The little boy nodded solemnly. My mummy says I should imagine everyone in their pajamas if I get scared. Louis giggled at this advice. That's a funny idea. But I think singing with all your friends probably makes it easier than doing it alone. Catherine's heart swelled with pride at her son's natural empathy. Despite his own position in the spotlight from such a young age, he retained the ability to recognize and comfort others who might be feeling anxious or uncertain. Miss Holbrook approached Catherine with a warm smile. Your children are wonderful with the others. Charlotte's curiosity about different languages and cultures is exactly what we try to encourage in our international music program. Music has always been such a powerful way to bring people together, Catherine replied. I'm constantly amazed by how it transcends language and cultural barriers. That's precisely why we've included songs from different traditions in today's program, Ms. Holbrook explained. We have children whose families come from all over the world, and we wanted to honor that diversity while celebrating our shared community here in Norfolk. As they chatted, Catherine learned more about the thoughtful preparation that had gone into the afternoon's musical program. The choir had spent weeks not just learning the songs but also studying their cultural origins and meanings. It was exactly the kind of educational approach that Catherine valued, one that combined artistic expression with cultural understanding and respect. The time for the carol performance was approaching, and Miss Holbrook began gathering her singers for their final preparations. Catherine, Charlotte, and Louis made their way back toward the main performance area, where families were beginning to assemble for the musical portion of the afternoon's entertainment. The setting for the carol performance was naturally beautiful. The singers would perform in front of the large Christmas tree in the center of the green, with the late afternoon light filtering through the decorated branches and the warm glow of the string lights beginning to become more prominent as daylight gradually faded. Catherine found herself reflecting on the afternoon's experiences as they settled into position for the concert. Every interaction had reinforced her sense of gratitude for the Norfolk community and the way they had welcomed her family. From the craftspeople sharing their skills to the performers sharing their talents, everyone had contributed to creating something larger than the sum of its parts, a true community celebration that honored tradition while embracing the diverse backgrounds of all participants. As the carol singers took their positions around the magnificent Christmas tree, the entire atmosphere of the village green seemed to shift into something even more magical. The string lights twinkled more brilliantly against the deepening sky, and families drew closer together on their blankets, creating an intimate sense of shared anticipation despite the large gathering. Catherine noticed how the children in the choir had transformed from the slightly nervous group they had met behind the refreshment tent into confident young performers. Their white scarves caught the light beautifully, and their posture reflected both their preparation and their pride in representing their schools and community. Miss Holbrook raised her hands, and a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that something special was about to happen. The first notes of Silent Night rang out across the green, sung in perfect harmony by voices ranging from the sweet soprano of the youngest singers to the changing voices of the teenagers. Louis moved closer to Catherine, not out of nervousness but from a desire to share the moment more intimately. Charlotte sat perfectly still, her face reflecting the same absorbed attention she had given to the puppet show but with an additional layer of appreciation for the musical artistry being displayed. The carol singers moved seamlessly from the familiar English version into other languages, demonstrating the international character Ms. Holbrook had described. When they reached the German verse that Charlotte had been practicing earlier, Catherine saw her daughter's face light up with recognition and pride as she quietly sang along with the words she had learned. Between songs, Ms. Holbrook provided brief context for each selection, explaining cultural traditions and the stories behind the music. It was education disguised as entertainment, the kind of learning that happened naturally when children were engaged and excited about what they were experiencing. Our next song comes to us from Poland, Ms. Holbrook announced, and it tells the story of the star that guided travelers to safety on the longest night of winter. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is always light to guide us home. The melody that followed was hauntingly beautiful, with harmonies that seemed to weave through the crisp evening air like silk. Catherine found herself thinking about the puppet show's message about home being where kindness and love were found, and how these musical traditions carried similar themes of hope, guidance, and community across cultures. A small commotion near the edge of the gathering caught Catherine's attention. An elderly gentleman in a wheelchair was having difficulty seeing the performance from his position behind the standing crowd. Without hesitation, several families began quietly rearranging themselves to create a better viewing angle for him, with parents lifting small children onto their shoulders to maintain clear sightlines for everyone. Charlotte noticed the same situation and leaned over to whisper to her mother. "Should we help make more space?" Catherine smiled at her daughter's immediate instinct to consider others' needs. "I think the community is handling it beautifully," she whispered back. "But keep watching, this is how neighbors take care of each other." Indeed, within moments, the elderly gentleman had been moved to a perfect viewing position, with a warm blanket tucked around his legs and a cup of hot tea in his hands, all accomplished without any formal organization or announcement. It was the kind of spontaneous community care that made Catherine proud to be part of this Norfolk family. The carol performance continued with songs from various traditions, a lively piece from Ireland that had several audience members clapping along, a gentle lullaby from Wales that seemed to calm even the most restless toddlers, and a joyful celebration song from the Caribbean that brought smiles to every face. As each song concluded, the applause was warm but respectful, allowing the magical atmosphere to build rather than breaking it with excessive enthusiasm. Catherine appreciated how the audience intuitively understood that they were part of something special, not merely observers but participants in a community-wide celebration of music and tradition. Lewis had become particularly fascinated by the youngest choir member, the 6-year-old boy he had spoken with earlier. Despite his obvious nervousness, the little boy was singing with complete dedication, his small voice blending perfectly with the larger group. During one song, when he briefly forgot his lyrics, the older children around him subtly supported him without drawing attention to his momentary confusion. "That little boy is so brave," Lewis whispered to Catherine. "I think he's younger than me, but he's singing in front of everyone." "He is brave," Catherine agreed. "And look how his friends are helping him. That's what good teamwork looks like." Charlotte had been observing different aspects of the performance. "Mummy, how do you think they learn to sing together like that when they're from different schools?" she asked quietly. "Their voices sound like they've always known each other." It was an astute observation that revealed Charlotte's growing appreciation for the complexity of human cooperation. "That's the magic of music, darling," Catherine replied. "When people come together with a shared purpose and practice hard, they can create something beautiful that none of them could make alone." As if to illustrate this point, the choir launched into their most complex arrangement yet, a traditional English round where different groups entered at different times, creating layers of melody that wove together into something intricate and beautiful. Catherine watched Charlotte's face as she began to understand how the individual voices supported each other, sometimes leading, sometimes following, but always contributing to the whole. The performance was building toward its conclusion when Ms. Holbrook made an unexpected announcement. "For our final song, we'd like to invite everyone to join us. This is the holly and the ivy, and we've chosen it because it represents the natural beauty of our Norfolk countryside during this special season." A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd as people realized they were being invited to participate rather than simply observe. Catherine felt Lewis's hand slip into hers as he looked up with uncertainty. "Do you know this song, Mummy?" he asked. "I do indeed," Catherine replied warmly. "It's one I learned when I was about your age. Shall we sing together?" As the familiar melody began, Catherine was moved by how naturally the entire community joined in. Voices of all ages and abilities blended together, supported by the strong foundation provided by the trained choir but enhanced by the enthusiasm of hundreds of participants. Charlotte's clear young voice joined in confidently, while Lewis sang more quietly but with obvious pleasure. Around them, Catherine could hear grandparents sharing the song with grandchildren, teenagers helping younger siblings with the words, and families creating their own small harmonies within the larger musical tapestry. The song spoke of the natural cycles of growth and renewal, of the holly's bright berries providing color in winter's darkness, and of the ivy's persistent green offering hope during the dormant season. Catherine found profound meaning in these lyrics as she looked around at the faces illuminated by the Christmas tree lights. This community, like the hardy plants celebrated in the song, continued to thrive and support each other through all seasons. As the final notes faded into the evening air, the silence that followed was profound and filled with shared satisfaction. Then, gradually, applause began, not the polite clapping of a formal performance, but the warm, enthusiastic appreciation of a community celebrating its own collective voice. Ms. Holbrook stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "This is why we do what we do, to bring people together and create moments of shared beauty." The choir members were beaming with pride and accomplishment, their earlier nervousness completely replaced by the satisfaction of a successful performance. Parents moved forward to congratulate their children, while other community members expressed their appreciation to Ms. Holbrook and the other organizers. Catherine found herself in conversation with several other parents, comparing notes about their children's musical education and discussing the value of community-based arts programs. It was the kind of natural networking that happened when people shared common interests and values, regardless of their different backgrounds or circumstances. "Mrs. Cambridge," called a familiar voice. Catherine turned to see Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the local pediatrician who had cared for Charlotte and Louis during various childhood illnesses. "I wanted to thank you for supporting events like this. Having the children see you and your family participating means so much to them." Catherine was touched by the sentiment but also felt compelled to redirect the appreciation. "Dr. Mitchell, I think we're the ones who should be thanking the community. Events like this give our children experiences they simply couldn't have anywhere else. This sense of belonging and shared celebration is invaluable." Dr. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been practicing medicine here for 20 years, and I've watched how these community events contribute to children's emotional and social development. There's something irreplaceable about seeing multiple generations come together to celebrate shared values and traditions." Their conversation was interrupted by Louis tugging gently on Catherine's coat. "Mummy, some of the choir children want to show us their school's art display. Can we go see it before it gets too dark?" Catherine looked around and realized that while they had been absorbed in the musical performance, the afternoon had continued to progress toward evening. The string lights were now providing most of the illumination across the green, creating a warm, golden glow that made everything look even more magical than during the bright afternoon hours. "Of course, darling," she replied. "Lead the way." The school art display had been set up near the far edge of the green, where several easels and display boards showed a remarkable variety of student artwork. The pieces ranged from simple crayon drawings by the youngest pupils to sophisticated paintings and sculptures by the older students. Charlotte was immediately drawn to a series of watercolor paintings depicting local wildlife throughout the seasons. The technical skill was impressive, but, more importantly, the paintings showed genuine observation and love for the natural world that surrounded their community. "These are beautiful," she said to the young artist who was standing proudly next to her work. "Did you watch the animals yourself to learn how to paint them like this?" The girl, probably about Charlotte's age, nodded enthusiastically. "I spend a lot of time in my garden with my sketchbook. My art teacher says the best way to paint something is to really understand it first." Louis had been captivated by a different section of the display, sculptural pieces made from natural materials found in the Norfolk countryside. Twigs, leaves, stones, and shells had been combined into imaginative creatures and abstract forms that showed both creativity and environmental awareness. "How did you get the wings to stay on this bird?" he asked the young sculptor, pointing to a particularly impressive piece that seemed to capture the essence of flight despite being made entirely of found materials. "It's all about balance," the boy explained seriously. "My dad helped me understand that if you find the right center point, even the lightest materials can support each other." Catherine listened to these conversations with growing appreciation for the depth of learning that was taking place through these artistic projects. The children weren't just creating decorative objects, they were developing observation skills, problem-solving abilities, and environmental awareness while expressing their individual creativity. As they moved through the art display, Catherine noticed how naturally Charlotte and Louis engaged with the young artists. There was genuine curiosity and respect in their questions, and authentic appreciation for the work being shared with them. These were the kinds of interactions that would help them understand their own future roles, not as distant figures above their community, but as engaged participants who could contribute to and learn from the shared cultural life of their neighbors. The evening was settling more deeply now, and Catherine realized that their time at the holiday show was drawing toward its natural conclusion. But she also sensed that none of them, herself, Charlotte, or Louis, were quite ready to leave this magical atmosphere behind. The evening air carried a crisp bite that made everyone draw their coats closer, but rather than discouraging the festivities, it seemed to enhance the cozy atmosphere that had settled over the village green. The string lights now provided the primary illumination, creating pools of warm golden light that made every face glow with contentment and every smile seem brighter. Catherine noticed that families were not hurrying to leave despite the advancing hour. Instead, people were gathering in small groups around the various warming stations, extending conversations and deepening connections that had been sparked throughout the afternoon. Children who had been strangers hours earlier were now playing together with the easy friendship that seemed to develop naturally in such settings. Mrs. Williams approached with a gentle reminder wrapped in warmth. Your Royal Highness, we have one final tradition if you and the children would like to participate. Every year, we conclude our holiday show with the lighting of the community lanterns. Each family contributes something they're grateful for this year, and we release the lanterns together as a symbol of our shared hopes for the coming year. Catherine felt her heart lift at this unexpected invitation. That sounds beautiful, she said sincerely. We would be honored to participate. Charlotte and Louis had overheard the conversation and were immediately intrigued by the prospect of this new experience. They followed Mrs. Williams toward a large table where dozens of paper lanterns waited, along with markers, colored pencils, and small pieces of paper for writing gratitude messages. The lantern-making station had become a natural gathering point for families throughout the green. Children sat cross-legged on blankets while parents helped them decide what to write, and teenagers worked independently on more elaborate artistic designs. The quiet concentration was punctuated by occasional laughter and the sharing of ideas between neighbors. Catherine watched as Charlotte carefully considered what she wanted to contribute to their family's lantern. Her daughter had always been thoughtful about such decisions, and Catherine could see her working through various possibilities before settling on her choice. I want to write about how grateful I am for learning new things, Charlotte finally announced. Today I learned German words, and about puppet making, and about how music brings people together. I think learning is one of the best parts of growing up. Catherine smiled at the maturity of this reflection. At 11, Charlotte was beginning to understand that education was not just about formal lessons but about remaining open to discovery in all aspects of life. That's a beautiful sentiment, darling, she said. What will you draw to go with your words? Charlotte considered this question seriously before beginning to sketch a small bookshelf surrounded by musical notes and art supplies. Her drawing skills had improved considerably over the past year, and Catherine could see how she was learning to use visual symbols to represent complex ideas. Louis, meanwhile, had a very different approach to the project. He was focused on drawing rather than writing, creating an elaborate picture of all the animals he had seen represented throughout the day, the puppet show rabbit, the woodcarver's horse, and the wildlife from the student paintings they had just admired. I'm grateful for animals, he announced matter-of-factly. They make everything more interesting and they help people feel happy. Catherine marveled at her son's ability to distill complex emotions into such simple, direct statements. His gratitude was immediate and heartfelt, unencumbered by the self-consciousness that sometimes complicated adult expressions of appreciation. As for her own contribution, Catherine found herself reflecting on the afternoon's experiences and what they had meant to her personally. After a moment of consideration, she wrote, I am grateful for the community that has welcomed our family and shown us that home is created by the kindness and creativity we share with one another. As she finished writing, Catherine realized that this simple exercise had helped her articulate something important about their life in Norfolk. The sense of belonging they had found here was not automatic or expected, it was the result of genuine human connections based on shared values and mutual respect. Other families around the table were engaged in similar reflections, and Catherine enjoyed overhearing snippets of the various gratitude expressions being shared. Children were thankful for pets, friends, favorite teachers, and successful school performances. Parents expressed appreciation for community support, children's health and happiness, and the opportunity to watch their families grow and thrive. An elderly couple at the next table caught Catherine's attention as they worked together on their lantern with the kind of easy cooperation that spoke to decades of partnership. The gentleman was carefully writing while his wife created delicate decorative borders around his words. What are we most grateful for this year, dear? She asked her husband softly. I think it has to be watching our granddaughter discover her love of music, he replied thoughtfully. She's in the choir that performed today, and seeing her confidence grow through her participation has been one of our greatest joys. Catherine realized they must be the grandparents of one of the young singers they had met earlier, and she was touched by how the afternoon's events had created meaningful connections across generations. The holiday show was not just an entertainment for children but a celebration that enriched the entire community's sense of shared purpose and accomplishment. As families finished their lanterns, Mr. Davies, the puppeteer, appeared with a warm smile and a practical announcement. Friends and neighbors, if you're ready to send your gratitude skyward, please join us in the center of the green. We'll light the lanterns together and watch them carry our hopes into the winter night. The migration toward the Christmas tree created a natural procession, with families carrying their completed lanterns and gathering in a large circle around the central focal point of the green. The warm light from the tree's decorations provided perfect illumination for the ceremony, while the string lights overhead created a canopy of stars that seemed to connect the earthbound celebration with the vast winter sky above. Catherine, Charlotte, and Louis found themselves standing next to the elderly couple whose conversation they had overheard, along with several other families they had met throughout the afternoon. The circle naturally organized itself without formal direction, demonstrating once again the community's intuitive ability to create meaningful shared experiences. Mrs. Williams stepped into the center of the circle carrying a special long-handled lighter designed for the lantern ceremony. "Before we light our lanterns," she announced, "let's take a moment to appreciate what we've shared today and what we hope to carry forward into the coming year." A peaceful quiet settled over the assembled group as people reflected on the day's experiences and their personal hopes for the future. Catherine used this moment to look around the circle at the faces illuminated by the Christmas tree lights. Children still buzzed with excitement from the afternoon's activities, parents relaxed and content, elderly community members beaming with satisfaction at another successful celebration. Charlotte reached over to take her mother's hand, a gesture that Catherine recognized as her daughter's way of acknowledging the significance of the moment. Louis, meanwhile, was holding their family's lantern with careful concentration, obviously taking his responsibility as the designated lantern carrier very seriously. The lighting ceremony began with the youngest children, and Catherine watched as tiny hands carefully guided by patient parents brought the first lanterns to glowing life. Each ignition was met with gentle applause and encouragement, creating an atmosphere of celebration that built gradually as more lanterns joined the growing constellation of lights. When it was Louis's turn, he stepped forward with admirable composure, accepting Mr. Davies's help with the lighting while maintaining careful control of the lantern. As their family's gratitude message glowed to life, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion and satisfaction with the day's experiences. Charlotte was next, carrying her own smaller lantern with the same careful attention her brother had demonstrated. As her lantern joined the growing collection of lights, she turned back to Catherine with a smile that contained both pride in her accomplishment and joy in being part of something larger than herself. The final lanterns belonged to the adults, and Catherine found herself deeply moved as she lit her own contribution to the ceremony. Around the circle, she could see similar emotions reflected in other faces: gratitude, hope, and a deep sense of connection to the community that had created this beautiful shared experience. With all lanterns glowing, Mrs. Williams made the final announcement. "On the count of 3, we'll release our lanterns together. 1, 2, 3. The sight of dozens of lanterns rising simultaneously into the dark winter sky was breathtaking. They ascended in a gentle cluster, their warm light creating moving constellations against the starry background. For several minutes, the entire group stood in appreciative silence, watching their collective gratitude and hopes drift upward until the lanterns became indistinguishable from the stars themselves. Louis broke the contemplative silence with a whispered observation that carried clearly in the still air. "They look like they're going to find the puppet show rabbit's family and tell them he made it home safely." His innocent comment brought gentle laughter and smiles from the adults around the circle, but Catherine realized there was profound wisdom in her son's interpretation of what they had just experienced. The lanterns did represent messages of safety, gratitude, and hope, not so different from the winter star in the puppet show that had guided the lost rabbit home to his family. As families began to gather their belongings and prepare for departure, the sense of completion was balanced by a reluctance to let the magical atmosphere come to an end. Children exchanged contact information for continued friendships, parents made plans for future community gatherings, and everyone seemed to understand that they had participated in something special that would live in their memories for years to come. Catherine found herself in conversation with several other mothers as they helped their children collect winter coats and scarves. The discussions ranged from practical matters like coordinating school pickup schedules to deeper reflections on the importance of community-based celebrations in children's development. "Days like this remind me why we chose to raise our children here," one mother said thoughtfully. "In our previous city, we had access to wonderful cultural events, but nothing that created this sense of genuine connection and belonging." Catherine nodded in understanding. "There's something irreplaceable about events where everyone participates rather than just observing." The children learn that community celebration is something they help create, not just something they consume. As they made their way back toward their car, Catherine noticed how naturally Charlotte and Louis had absorbed the lessons of the afternoon. They walked confidently among the dispersing families, saying genuine thank yous to the various organizers and performers they encountered, and expressing sincere interest in continuing friendships with children they had met during the day's activities. The drive home was peaceful, with both children processing their experiences in characteristic ways. Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about the organization required for such events and expressed interest in perhaps helping with planning in future years. Louis, meanwhile, entertained himself by recreating some of the puppet show dialogue, complete with character voices that made Catherine and Charlotte laugh. As they turned into their own driveway, Catherine realized that the afternoon's experiences had accomplished something important beyond simple entertainment. Charlotte and Louis had seen their community at its best, creative, inclusive, supportive, and joyful. They had participated as valued members rather than special guests, contributing their own enthusiasm and curiosity to the collective celebration. Most importantly, they had experienced firsthand how individual talents and efforts could combine to create something beautiful that enriched everyone involved. From the craftspeople sharing their skills to the performers sharing their artistry to the families sharing their gratitude, the holiday show had demonstrated the kind of community values that Catherine hoped her children would carry with them throughout their lives. Later that evening, as she tucked Charlotte and Louis into their beds, Catherine listened to their reflections on the day's adventures. Both children were already making plans for next year's holiday show, discussing skills they wanted to learn and ways they might contribute to future celebrations. "Mummy," Charlotte said sleepily, "I think I'd like to learn puppet making next year. Mr. Davies said he sometimes teaches workshops for young people who are interested in theater arts." "That sounds like a wonderful goal," Catherine replied, tucking the covers around her daughter's shoulders. "I suspect Mr. Davies would be delighted to have such an enthusiastic student." In Louis's room, the conversation took a different direction. "Next year, can we help make the lanterns earlier in the day? I want to help other children who might need assistance with their writing or drawing." Catherine smiled at her son's instinctive desire to help others, recognizing both his natural empathy and the positive influence of the day's experiences. "I think that's a beautiful idea, darling. Helping others participate is one of the most important ways to contribute to community celebrations." As she turned off the lights and made her way to her own room, Catherine reflected on the profound satisfaction the day had brought. In a world that often seemed divided and hurried, the Norfolk Holiday Show had provided a perfect example of what was possible when people came together with shared values and genuine care for one another's well-being. The lanterns were long gone, disappeared into the vast Norfolk sky, but the connections they represented, between neighbors, between generations, between individual creativity and community celebration, would continue to illuminate their lives long after the Christmas decorations were packed away for another year. Tomorrow would bring the return of formal schedules and official responsibilities, but tonight, Catherine fell asleep with the warm glow of genuine community celebration filling her heart and the sound of her children's contented breathing reminding her that some of life's most important lessons were learned not in classrooms or palaces, but in the simple joy of neighbors gathering to share their talents and gratitude under a canopy of stars.